American Timelines is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network, powered by Ortho Carolina. Find out more at queencitypodcastnetwork.com.
So now I'm obsessed with time. Come on, tell me about the time. Had it all in my hand tonight. Had the time of my life. When the words all come down like blues on Tuesday.
Okay.
Welcome to another motherfucking episode of
American Timelines. I'm Amy, and that's Joe.
And we're History for Jerks.
Yes.
This is episode 131.
Is it really?
Yeah, and we're still doing this shit.
I know.
And we are going to continue despite COVID finally affecting American timelines. COVID has taken out our guest.
That's right.
We lost a guest this week. We were going to have the great Matt Truman from the Matt Truman Ego Trip, who does the theme song, the opening, right. And we always play a ending song, one of his songs at the end of the episode too, because Matt Truman just kicks ass. So right. I think it was time for us to have him on and have our listeners meet the man who sings like that. I like to call him Mick Jagger mixed with Prince.
Yeah.
Like you mix those two. If those two have fucked and somehow had a baby, it would be this guy. And he's hilarious, too. That's the other thing. He's hilarious. Like, if you just look at his Facebook posts. Like,
yeah, he's ridiculous.
He created a group just called Just Polls. And it's just a bunch of stupid polls that mean nothing that people just post. And it's hilarious. Anyway, we'll talk. But we've postponed his visit because he and his wife both got COVID. We hope they're doing okay. They seem to be doing okay, but they're just feeling like shit.
Yeah.
They both work with people with disabilities, and COVID is running rampant through group homes right now in Ohio. So we're glad he agreed to be on, but we're sad he couldn't be on this week. He was really excited to talk about a guy getting sniped at a baseball game. So we had a last-minute pinch hitter who I was going to schedule to be on anyway, who happens to be sort of the lead guy on History for Jerks' new podcast called Nerd Skool.
Right.
Please,
sorry, I said right.
Oh, yeah, right. Please welcome my brother, Andy, Professor Andy, I should call him, Professor Nerd Andy. Welcome, Andy.
Hey, thank you. I've been told to say I am a stupid piece of shit.
Well, that's just so we can sync up recordings. I see. That's how we figure out.
All right, that was the key. Okay, I just
and
thought
you just happen to be right.
Yes,
happens to be a true statement. Yes, Andy is a piece of shit, and he's my brother. So welcome, Andy.
It's kind of mandatory for History for Jerks to have jerky pieces of shit on.
Yes, because we're jerks and we're pieces of shit. And we're welcoming. We're welcoming my brother, who was actually our first guest, I believe, we've ever had. In our first season, we had a guest. So Andy's back. He was our first guest, and he's back. But we decided we're only going to have this season people that have something to plug. And now that Andy's in the new Nerd Skool podcast with me, he's got something to plug. So tell us about Nerd Skool, Andy.
Nerd Skool, yeah. There's a few available episodes out now. Basically, Joe here is sort of an aspiring nerd, but he's in conflict between getting into nerd stuff and having a lot of contempt for nerds and nerd things. So he's taking baby steps into learning how to be a nerd, and I am a gigantic, ridiculous nerd. And TBJ and Art Star, our other co-hosts, are all different sorts of nerd in different veins. I'm more the pedantic, condescending nerd, whereas
I don't think so, though. I think you think of that yourself. I mean, maybe you are inadvertently, but you seem to be apologetic towards people. You know, you seem to be the welcoming nerd. It seems like we talk a lot about nerds who are either bullying or not, angst ridden or whatever. And you're always talking about nerds welcoming people and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm if I had made a few different worse choices in my life, I could have gone down the shittier nerd paths.
The dark nerd path?
Or like the
incel?
Yeah.
The incel nerd
incel,
path?
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about the incels on a couple episodes.
Yeah, because that's not necessarily a vein of nerd, but there is some overlap.
Yeah.
But it's... but yeah, we just have conversations sort of introducing Joe to the world of nerdy shit. We started with the We're going through the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the first season of it.
I want you to get to the Star Wars Christmas special.
Yeah, so the Star Wars universe we're not even touching, but we did talk about recently. We don't have we've done Iron Man, we've recorded Hulk and Iron Man 2. We're getting ready to start Thor, but the only episodes that are out right now are the Iron Man ones, and we're getting into the Hulk ones. But we've decided we don't have to go. We are going to go in order in the MCU, but we don't have to stick on the do all of the MCU before we do anything else nerdy.
Right, that's true. That
go
could be
off on tangents.
We could do a special holiday Star Wars holiday special episode.
Yeah,
but we just kind of missed Christmas.
We've missed the holidays, so
yeah.
we might have to revisit that later. But
yeah,
because I just realized I started watching the Batman.
Yeah.
I went back and watched 1989's Batman because I wanted to compare all the Batmans, and then I realized what a tall task that is and how many fucking movies there are that I gotta watch, and I don't particularly care about Batman. So that's a whole nother thing.
That's why I was wondering why you were.
But we'll get into that. I think the big thing is I don't know. We'll get into Nerd School, but
you're big into timelines, and you want to see Batman's timeline as well.
Yes, I like chronology, and I like comparing things like from the beginning to the end, and so I want to see. I don't think I ever saw any of the Batmans, and I saw the 1989 Batman, but in 1989, I didn't give a shit about anything except, like trying to get girls and whatever. So I was only half paying attention to anything. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm like trying to pay attention to things. Like I had no idea the whole plot was that the Joker is poisoning everybody with chemicals, and
that's pretty standard Joker stuff right there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's why I have a lot to talk about. Anyway, we'll get into all that on Nerd School, so if you want to hear us just kind of me ask a bunch of dumb questions to nerds, because it fascinates me, too, about, like, when nerds get pissed about movies. Like, Andy always talks about, oh, yeah, the nerds are really mad about this movie that came out. Like, this huge blockbuster Iron Man came out. It was awesome, filled with explosions, and Amy and I went to see it, and we're like, oh, my God, what an amazing movie. It's great that they can actually do comic book movies real now, and they look real. What a great movie. And I get home, and Andy's like, yeah, everybody's pissed about it and hated it. Why do they hate it? Now, maybe not particularly Iron Man, but all these movies. They get mad about stupid shit. Well, it didn't follow the comic book, and they're mad. And Andy had that previous podcast that I tried to listen to, and I didn't understand what they were talking about. So what I thought is, like, let's make one more accessible for normal people that can kind of follow a comic book. And you can kind of tell normal people about comic books in a non-threatening way.
Yeah. I'm offended that you're saying that nerds aren't normal people.
Well, no, the podcast he had on what was it? Brave Online.
Which is no longer a site that's anything. But we had a booker. Me and Ian Robinson, who used to be on MTV back in the early aughts. We had a
name
podcast called
No, it's okay.
It's my cred.
It is cred.
Yeah, it's we had a show called The Book Report that was absolutely aimed for people who were really into comic books, who were
like super, like people that know everything.
Like
they'd start talking about Hulk, and then 30 seconds later, they're talking about issue 745 and the guy who illustrated page 14. In his
and
I get just it. And I was like, I don't understand what they're even talking about anymore.
Yeah. So this is more acceptable, and also TBJ and Artstar are a huge addition to give us new perspective, because TBJ is the secret nerd.
She is that, and that's the reason. They're kind of the reason we wanted to really start it. Andy and I were thinking about starting this podcast, and we met these two that we work with, and a lot of times we have downtime. We sit around and just BS, and these two are two people that I would have never guessed are nerds, because number one, Tiffany is super cool. She's got cool style, and she wears the cool glasses, and she's always got it. I mean, she's just always done up, and she's just real smooth and cool and fun. Like, so I never would have guessed she was into nerd stuff. And then she knows her shit. Like, she knows about Star Wars and the Hobbits and all that, or not Hobbits, but what's the Harry Potter?
Yeah,
all that stuff. Like, she dressed up like Harry Potter for a thing. And then Art he's really, he and I talk about football all the time. So I generally assume sports fans aren't nerds. So and then they got into a big argument about Batman, and it was very entertaining just watching them argue with each other. And so I was like, this needs to be a podcast. So that's kind of how.
And absolutely, if we're going to talk about Batman, we need to have TBJ in there. So
of course. So we'll do that. Yeah. So we'll table.
That'll definitely be a Nerd School.
But that's
All
enough
right.
about Nerd Skool. So check that out. You've heard us talk about it endlessly, but if you don't, and a lot of our fans are like, nah, no thanks.
Yeah.
They're just not into nerd stuff.
No.
But that's the thing. We're trying to make it accessible to everybody. Anyway,
All right.
so that's enough about Nerd Skool. Let's jump into 1950.
July.
July of 1950. Andy's been given a topic
Yeah.
to cover. Thanks to the awesome Daniel and Nathaniel from last week, the Scottish guys from the Who the Fuck Is podcast last week. We had a lot of fun with those guys.
Nice.
And they've already talked about they're going to come back in a couple weeks for the 1951
Oh, cool.
Scottish. We're going to do a Scottish timelines every year.
Oh, that'll be awesome.
for
Yeah,
every-
I had a lot of fun with them.
Yeah. So
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I've heard clips and they sound really cool. I haven't gotten to that episode yet. I'm still a little behind. But I'm
Yeah,
looking
so you
forward to
should
hearing
download their podcast, Andy, because they talk about movies.
Now, Joe, should he masturbate to that one too?
You should masturbate to that one
Okay.
too.
Just
Earlier,
making sure,
before we
checking.
were recording, I was telling Andy he should have masturbated to our previous episode. He was listening to Jessica's episode. So when you listen to the Scottish fellas, you can't help but masturbate listening to that one.
that. Yeah.
But those guys, they have 2 seasons, and it's called Who the Fuck Is.
Yep.
Anyway, it was fun. You should listen to those guys. They just started it during the pandemic, so they've got 2 seasons already, and they just started. So, all right, we'll jump in. July 1st, 1950 was a Saturday, and the 8055th, I don't know if they say 8,055th, MASH unit became the first mobile Army surgical hospital to be activated in South Korea.
Okay.
On July 6th, its physicians, nurses, and support staff would be sent from Sasebo to Busan, initially to be set up at Daejeon. It was followed by the 8063rd MASH, often referenced on the television show MASH, which was activated on July 17th and July 18th at Pohang to support the U.S. 1st Cavalry. Now, on the show MASH, that was Surgical Hospital 4077. It was actually fictional, but the wisecracking main character, Hawkeye Pierce, was based on a real person. Did you guys know that?
Oh.
He was based on H. Richard Hornberger. Did you know that, Andy?
I didn't know the name, but I knew the MASH was a movie long before it was a TV show.
Yeah. It had some of the same people, right?
I think Radar carried over. I think.
Yeah.
But it was
I thought Hawkeye was the same guy, too.
no.
right?
Donald Sutherland was either Hawkeye
Yeah,
or Trapper John.
that's right.
And
And Elliot Gould.
Elliot Gould was
Elliot
the other one.
Gould
Yeah.
was. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there was a Frank Burns who was someone else. I don't know. I saw that movie once, and the show is more enjoyable. I'm not a big fan of the director. Robert Altman is everyone loves that guy, or if film nerds love that guy. I've seen a couple movies, and some of them are. I mean, he did freaking Robin Williams' Popeye, and that was weird and fun.
Oh, yeah.
But,
That was good.
But everyone is nuts about this movie Nashville that he did. When it was that just bored me to tears. So sometimes, anyway, yeah, Hawkeye
Well, you're
was a
not
real
into
dude.
country music.
No, but it was. I am at this point. My wife's really into it, so I've
Oh,
learned
I
about
guess
it
you
as
have
well
to
as-
be.
Yeah, no, it's country music is good for breakup songs and hard living songs.
Yeah.
What about the Nelly song with Georgia
Satellites.
something line? What's Georgia Florida border?
What are you talking
I
about?
don't know what he's talking about.
It's called
No.
Cruise. Baby, you a song you want to
All
make
right.
me roll my windows down and cruise.
Moving on.
According to History.com, though, the former U.S. Army surgeon, H. Richard Hornberger, who Hawkeye was based on, penned the book that led to the series, and he was as heroic and humorous as Hawkeye himself, but he came to hate the TV's take on his own creation. I don't know if he might have been mad because he barely profited from the show. He only got $500 per episode, which I think
that's bullshit.
but it ended up being $125,000.
For
That's still bullshit.
11
You know
years
how
of a
many
show
millions?
based on your life.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
you
know.
kidding?
I mean, how much did you got to give the guy who
Created
came
it?
up with the idea? He didn't create the show. He's like, if I want to base a show on our neighbor, I got to make them super rich.
Yeah.
Oh,
If you make
okay.
money off of it.
If you get
anyway.
if you make money off of your neighbor needs a piece.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, a piece is $500 an episode. But his
Oh my
bitterness,
God.
was more than financial. As the show's reputation for its commentary on war grew, he distanced himself more and more from the series.
Oh, he was probably a hawk.
Yeah. Well, he
It's Hawkeye.
actually this actual guy, Hornberger, pioneered a kind of surgery that was prohibited during the war. He possessed the courage and audacity to attempt artery repair when it was forbidden. And by one account, he may have been the first to try that. But I can imagine if you're really in a Korean War in a tent like that, you're going to... I don't know. I would think you would just try. Seems like there's no rules. Like, just try whatever.
Yeah, right.
You know, there's like, you're in a tent.
I'm sure there's rules. So.
Yeah, you're in the military. It's all rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, that same day, 23 American soldiers became the first to die in the Korean War when their C-54 transport plane crashed into a 2,000-foot high hill 40 miles northwest of Busan upon arrival from Japan. That same day, the city of Gainesville, Florida, renamed all of its main streets using a system of numbers and directions.
What? Like First Street?
Yep. First East and Second Street West, probably. Or North and East and West.
Good job, Gainesville.
I
Yeah,
guess.
I'm trying to figure out if that would be a good thing or not.
Probably. I mean, like...
Easy to find stuff.
with New York City, like making it into a grid makes it a lot easier to get around than a place like Boston.
But New York isn't a grid, is it?
Yeah.
I've always heard.
Chicago is.
I know Chicago's a grid.
Yeah, New York is a grid, and I was the first time I visited there, I was able to figure out how to get around on the subway pretty quickly because
Yeah.
the numbered
Yeah, the
letters.
grids are definitely. I figured out Chicago.
Yeah,
because
because New York's got all those numbered 57, 58, 15. It's easy to figure out. Oh, well, I'm on 57, so I'll just go to 59.
Yeah,
8th and
it's
whatever.
there's numbered avenues that are higher than there's numbered streets that are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing then.
It should all. Everybody should be on a grid. That's why, like here, Charlotte, North Carolina is not easy to find stuff.
No, and neither is
Yeah.
Boston, Massachusetts. That
Yeah,
whole
is that
city
hard?
would need to be destroyed and rebuilt in order to get a grid.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, we're going to jump to July 3rd, which is a Monday, and the Hazel Scott Show made its debut on the Dumont television network, becoming the first televised program to be hosted by an African-American woman.
Good.
Singer Hazel Scott appeared live on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings from 7:45 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they gave a black woman a show, but she only had a 15-minute show.
Oh, yeah.
I think
Frickin'.
that's like Tim Meadows had a Saturday Night Live sketch where they only gave him like a 15-minute perspectives. Welcome to Perspectives, and he only had 10 minutes, and it was like he never knew what he was talking about. But that was kind of the joke was
Probably based on that, maybe. I think they probably had 15-minute shows, and I think television is still relatively new, and they're figuring stuff out. But
that's true.
But she was on 3 nights a week, so
and
this
this is
that's
still
45 minutes a week.
Yeah, this is still pretty early television, so I guess that's a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, she had appeared in nightclubs, on radio and television programs, on Broadway, and in 5 feature films before that, so she was no rookie. That same day, the CBS radio network show Granby's Green Acres, created by Jay Summers, made its debut as a summer replacement series, starring Gail Gordon and Bo Benedere as John and Martha Granby, 2 big city residents who become farmers. Though the radio show only ran for 8 episodes, it would be adapted to television 15 years later as Green Acres.
Okay.
Did you know there was a radio show first?
I did not.
But that was boring as hell.
You don't love radio shows, do you?
You know what? I have listened to. There's a couple Star Wars radio dramas that you can find on YouTube, and it's actually, I think, episode 4, 5, and 6 are possibly recorded that way, and they're like 4 hours long, and Mark Hamill's actually in it, and Carrie Fisher's in it, and it's actually the movies, but it's actually the book versions of the movies. So there's scenes that aren't in the movies, and you hear Mark Hamill like. There's a lot of background on Luke, like with his buddies back home,
Right.
like Biggs and all those guys that he talks about that you see once in the movies. There's all these scenes with him fucking around with his buddies, and they're all talking about womp rats and all this stuff, and it's actually really entertaining. So
there you
boom,
go. Well, and if
Yeah.
you like podcasts, I
Yeah,
assume you
podcasts are basically radio
radio
shows. So
Yeah.
they are radio dramas now that anybody can do.
Right.
Yep. So, and that brings us to July 4th, 1950, which is a Tuesday. And I understand my piece of shit brother has a story for us.
yes, indeed. All right, I'm going to do a little backstory here on what just happened. Although I think you already said it at the beginning. What Matt Truman was going to cover. I just found out about this last night, so I kind of stayed up all night researching this. So,
yes.
Yeah. So here we go.
It's dedication.
All right. So Bernard Lawrence Doyle was born in 1896, which is something that blows my mind anyway. We're talking about people that were born then and that lived till 1950. He was born in Lowell, Massachusetts, to an Irish father and a Welsh mother, neither of whom had been in America for more than 5 years at the time. Utah had only become a state 8 months prior to this.
Wow.
Oh, my gosh.
And Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arizona wouldn't follow suit for more than a decade when he was born. Utah, Oklahoma, they weren't states. It's fun to just think about
crazy.
that context.
Well, my great-grandma was born in the end of the 1800s, and I knew her in my lifetime.
Isn't that nuts?
It's nuts.
Yeah,
I
I
always
guess
think
that's right.
about. I always think about
so
her
you're connected to
when I
H-
think of metrics because I remember her talking about it. She was
Yeah.
born in the end of the 1800s.
Our great grandpa was 1900.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right,
go ahead, Ando.
By the age of 14, he moved from his family moved from Massachusetts to Rockland County, north of New York City, and he left school at 14 to help his family with blue collar jobs until he was drafted into the Navy for World War I and stationed in England. Eventually, he got married to a nurse from New Jersey named Margaret, settled down in the Hoboken area, and had 2 kids, Bernard Jr. and Eileen. While he was getting involved with small-time boxing as his passion, which is kind of a thing that people of Irish descent were really getting into at the time.
Yeah.
He fought for a bit under the name Barney Doyle, and that name stuck. Everyone called him Barney for a long time. And he eventually became the head trainer in Jersey City Irish American Athletic Club and began to manage a guy named Joe Braddock, even guiding him to the state welterweight championship.
All right.
Yep. So Barney Doyle had a reputation as being really ambitious and also really mouthy, and which served him well when he started to manage Joe Braddock's younger brother James, who was blasting his way through the amateur ranks of boxing, winning titles he won titles by knocking out 3 people in 2 different weight divisions in a 48-hour span.
Wow.
This guy was good, and one of the prizes for that third knockout was a shiny watch that Doyle carried around for months, showing it off every chance he got while talking the ears off of local sports reporters. And he started smoking cigars all the time and looked like a big shot. It's like a wrestling manager almost, like Classy Freddie Blassie in a way.
Yeah, that's what I'm picturing.
Yeah.
Yeah, pencil neck gait.
Yeah, and he was all about he's jammering. He was very good on being the mouthpiece for his boxers.
Okay.
However, with James Braddock was looking really good, but Doyle's temper cost him his meal ticket eventually. When one time Joe Braddock, the first guy he was managing, got knocked unconscious in a match after getting a bit sloppy in the ring. And instead of going to help him out, Doyle just got mad and left the whole building in frustration, thinking that Joe was ignoring his advice. And you don't do that if you're a boxing manager. You go help out your boxer if they get knocked out in the ring.
So he might have been telling him, duck, Rocky, duck, and he's not ducking.
Yeah,
Rocky,
or like between rounds, he's like, this is what you gotta do. You gotta stick and move. You gotta do the thing. You gotta do the thing, Rock.
Stick and move. Yeah, rope-a-dope, whatever it is.
And then I guess maybe he didn't do that, and Doyle got mad about it and stormed off. And that's not a thing you do. And when Joe Braddock woke up, his brother James told him what happened, and he was pretty pissed about that. So eventually, he was determined that Joe was determined he was going to manage his brother's career himself. And by 1926, Doyle was kicked off of the team, and he was relegated back into small-time boxing circles. While James Braddock eventually went on to become the world heavyweight champion.
Really?
In the mid-30s, and in the face of so much adversity, like he had injuries and he had no money, but somehow he came back and won the world heavyweight title. They made a movie about him. Ron Howard made the movie Cinderella Man, and Russell Crowe played that guy in a movie.
Oh,
yeah.
Did you ever see that, Abe?
No, of course not.
But
of course not. You're not into 30s boxers?
No.
Although I did like the Muhammad Ali movie, but
Yeah.
I'm not a big boxing fan.
Right.
I'm surprised.
Did
you ever see Mike Tyson against Buster Douglas?
No.
When Mike Tyson bit his ear?
I heard about it.
Or was that Holyfield?
Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear, but Buster Douglas
right.
is the guy that beat Mike Tyson after he was considered unbeatable. And I
That's
could have
right.
sworn Buster Douglas died like 15 years ago, but apparently he's still alive.
Yeah, I think he still wanted to fight again.
Yeah, something like that.
I remember when Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear, that's the infamous let Dale through day.
Oh, yeah.
Where we were watching it in college. We were watching it as some buddy of a buddy of a buddy got the pay-per-view. And it was like, as many people come over as possible. It's cheaper. Everybody pay $1 and you can see it. That means there was like 100 people in this college apartment watching this boxing match. And we're sitting on a coffee table. We're sitting on a coffee table because everybody has to sit everywhere. So there's 3 of us sitting on a coffee table, packed with people everywhere. There's kegs of beer everywhere. You know, everybody's watching the fights real loud. And somebody it was me and Brendan Kane, and somebody grabbed our shoulders like, hey. And we're like, yeah, what? Brendan turns and he says, let Dale through. And so Brendan kind of moves to let somebody through, and nobody comes through. He waits a couple seconds, and he sits back normal. A couple minutes later, somebody pushes him again. Hey. Yeah, what? Let Dale through. So he moves over to let Dale through, and nobody ever comes through. And so he sits back again, and then they're like, hey, man, hey. It's like, what the fuck do you want? Let Dale through. And he's like, where the fuck is Dale? And then the guy just walked off. And then nothing ever happened. We never found out who Dale was. So that's the let
He
Dale
must
through
have
story.
been, obviously he was saying something else and you didn't understand what he was saying.
You don't think he was saying let Dale through?
No, obviously not.
I wonder what he was saying then. He was probably like dying or something. I'm choking. Give
I
me the
know.
Heimlich maneuver.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was like having a stroke and let Dale through was coming out and he meant to say call 911.
Seriously, it could have.
He was probably really drunk too, so
Let Dale through.
maybe he was Dale and he wanted everybody to get up. Or
And
something.
he
Who
talked
knows?
in the
Anyway.
third person.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, let Dale through.
Right. Okay. So Doyle got kicked off the team, and his protege got super famous, and he did not. And I don't even think he's in the movie. That's how much of a footnote he is.
He's not.
No. So this was 1926, and he didn't win the championship until like 1935 or so.
All right.
So having lost that, he went back doing small time boxing training and stuff, and eventually settled down and started working for a freight company on the New Jersey docks. He worked there for many years while his kids grew up and struck out on their own. His daughter going to nursing school, and was planning to get married in the fall of 1950.
His daughter did or he did?
His daughter did. He was married. Doyle had to retire after a heart attack in 1949, limited his ability to work.
Yeah.
And Doyle was also really into baseball. He was a huge fan of the New York baseball Giants and would often go to the games at the Polo Grounds in Upper Manhattan. Especially more now that he'd retired, he had more time on his hands. The Polo Grounds New York at the time had 3 professional baseball teams. There was the Yankees, there was the Giants, and there was the Brooklyn Dodgers. And so baseball was huge. And so he would go to the games a lot. So Barney, I like to say Barney, had made plans to go to a game on Friday, June 30th, with his son, who was now 29 years old. But when he couldn't make it, he decided to do a favor for a friend of his from his boxing days, a guy named Otto Flagg. And
Otto Flagg, y'all.
I was wondering which one of the names in here would get the y'all treatment.
Otto Flagg is great.
Otto Flagg.
right.
I thought Barney Doyle might have gotten it, but Otto Flagg is pretty good too.
Brendan Kane likes it when I say that.
That's true.
I mean,
He's the only one.
Brian McCartney. I was gonna say likes it. No, he actually hates it.
So
That's what made him stop listening to our podcast.
that you said Otto Flagg all the time.
No, just when I say somebody's name, y'all, he hates that. Brian McCartney, y'all, he hates that. He'll never listen to this because he stopped listening.
I see.
All right.
So he took Otto's son, Otto Jr., who was 13 at the time. He said, I'm going to take this kid to the game because he'd been recently getting to know the kid and was teaching him how to box to keep his nose clean and out of trouble.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's go to the ballpark and have a good time with this kid, and it'll be cool. So they were going to go June 30th, which was Friday prior, but they found out at the last minute, oh, crap, this is a night game. We can't do that. So instead, he got tickets to the first game of the doubleheader on Tuesday, July 4th, where the Giants were taking on Brooklyn Dodgers, where Jackie Robinson was playing at the time, and it was a
big
crosstown
deal.
rivalry. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
So Barney Doyle got up early on the 4th, put on his straw hat to cover his hair, and grabbed his cigars. He was still smoking cigars all the time. Picked up Otto Jr., who barely slept a wink because he was so excited to go to a baseball game. Even though there were 3 different teams in the New York area, going to a game was still a huge deal in 1950. Especially to a kid, where most people still didn't have televisions. Alaska and Hawaii still weren't states yet.
Yeah.
God, I bet it was boring.
Sheesh. Yeah.
I bet it was boring to live back then.
Well, just living. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine living without a smartphone, so I can't imagine
I know.
living without anything else. Like,
but if it's not invented yet, you don't know what you're missing. Life is what it is at the time you are.
That's why time travel is unwise.
Yeah.
That's the only reason.
you go back and you're like, geez, I'm bored as hell.
Yeah,
Why
I
did I
know.
come back here?
God.
Can't do anything. I can't check Twitter in 1950.
But I bet it's a lot more calm. Well, you have a lot of time to just think and do nothing.
Yeah.
Probably.
And-
You're more in the moment, probably. People
yeah.
are more in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you'd get used to it.
Anyway.
If you spend enough time there, you'd kind of get used to the pace.
Yeah.
You'd adjust. People are good at that. So anyway, they drove up from New Jersey, got to the field, and settled into their left center field seats at the Polo Grounds. And the Polo Grounds was kind of a weird stadium. For, like, the measurements were all weird, and a lot of people, there was a lot to that. But one of the reasons is most stadiums, are built up. There's a giant structure, and you go, and there. But in this, you could take the subway to the Polo Grounds, and you got off at the subway station, and you could look down at the field. Like, it was sort of built into a depression, rather than built into a tall building. And so, if you're in left center field, you can see the whole field. You can see home plate, and behind home plate, you got the stands, and then behind that is this place called Coogan's Bluff, which is like the edge of Harlem. There's this Edgecombe Avenue, and there's a bunch of apartment buildings there. They're just looking over, and apparently Coogan's Bluff was often called Tightwad Hill because people could go there onto the buildings and see games from there without having to buy a ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was so it was just kind of an interesting view. There's a picture in this book. I have to remember the title of the book. Remind me to cite my source here because there was a book I read that was really good and had way more information than I could find anywhere else.
Yeah, I need that source later.
Right, I will remind me that. So the Polo Grounds were packed. It was a crosstown rival game, and they noticed that Otto Jr. couldn't see the field over the head of the guy in front of him, so Barney switched seats with him to give him a better view as the Dodgers were taking their batting practice. And then around 12:30 p.m. on a sunny 4th of July, a loud popping noise was heard by some people, like a paper bag bursting.
Yeah.
And then Barney turned to say something to Otto, but instead his head jerked and he slumped forward. His ears, nose, and mouth erupted with blood.
Oh.
And Otto tried to straighten him up and then called for help, thinking Barney was having a heart attack. Although there was a fan nearby that claimed to be a doctor, took a look at him and just said, "That man's dead."
Jeez.
Wow.
That was the end of Barney Doyle, but not many people around noticed.
They didn't even notice?
Not really. I mean, everyone's eyes are on the game. And people, and the game hasn't started yet, so people are still filing in. And they're in left center field, and eventually about 9 or so cops, park employees, medical professionals, all started gathering around, and it was enough of a commotion to draw some attention. But most people had no reason to believe anything more unusual than a heart attack. Like Otto thought he was having a heart attack. Like, some guy is having a problem.
Yeah.
Maybe it was cerebral hemorrhage, something like that. The police did notice that there was a slug partially visible near his left temple, but they were more confused than anything. And they didn't. Eventually, they took Doyle out on a stretcher, and the games went on as normal. The Giants won the opening game. The Dodgers took the nightcap. Jackie Robinson injured his leg. The Giants manager almost got into a fight with a Dodgers outfielder. The games just happened. The players didn't really know what happened. Neither did most of the 49,000 people in the stands, because the police didn't do anything to suggest to the fans that there was any kind of murdery danger.
Yeah.
Even Barney's 83-year-old father, Andrew, who was watching the game on TV, had no idea.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't until it got onto the radio a bit later. Early newspaper reports painted a more callous picture of the fans who didn't even care, and even suggested that Otto was more concerned about missing the game than he was about answering police questions about Barney's death. According to him, saying, "Gee, I've been dreaming about this game for a month." But
Yeah.
so this sort of painted him as like he cared more about baseball than
Didn't
this.
care.
But even if he did say that, it's sort of understandable, thinking he was
Well,
probably
he's like his dad's friend. It's not like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like his dad
but,
or anything.
but it's also he's probably just in shock and
Yeah.
Right.
kind of horrified. This dude, his sort of new mentor, was bleeding all over him and dead.
yeah.
There were reports that he was bewildered or horrified, and when he was finally picked up and taken home from the stadium at 4 p.m., he was still in a daze. So I imagine he was just
Yeah,
completely.
it's got to be hard to process that.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, he's 13.
What's
He's
happened? Or anybody.
yeah, he's 13, and that doesn't happen.
right.
Yeah.
No one's ever been shot in a baseball stadium before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the medical examiner determined he'd been shot over the left temple, and the bullet moved downward and lodged into the other side of his skull. And the police had to then figure out what the hell happened, with no witnesses,
Yeah.
no evidence, no suspects, and no
Yeah.
clue about motive.
Yeah.
Wow.
Assistant Chief Inspector Conrad Rothengast assigned.
Conrad Rosenbergs, y'all.
Thank you.
There you go.
I included that name specifically to get a y'all.
Yeah.
He assigned like 80 cops to comb the area in the polo grounds and all the areas around it, and they searched for hours. They questioned a bunch of kids playing in the bushes near Coogan's Bluff before they found an undischarged 22 caliber cartridge in a wooded area of the bluff behind a playground. And Rothengast told the press that he thought that's where the bullet was fired from, almost half a mile away.
Huh.
Wow.
So they scoured the park until 10 p.m. By 12:30 a.m. that night, they had rounded up a dozen boys as suspects, and one of them admitted to owning a pair of 22 caliber rifles and one 22 pistol in his top floor Edgecombe Avenue apartment. And they found more 22 shells on the roof, with the parapet of the roof having been shot up with bullets as well. That's when they decided to arrest 14-year-old Robert Mario Peebles for juvenile delinquency for owning the guns, and then see if they could find proof to link him to the Doyle killing.
Oh, man. Related to Mario Van Peebles?
I knew you were going to say that.
There's no Van in there. Van Peebles.
It doesn't matter.
And the next day, July 5th,
Yeah? Oh, you mean the same day that Huey Lewis was born as Hugh Anthony Craig III in New York City?
exactly.
Yeah?
And that plays into this, because Huey Lewis's birth was sort of changed the entire scope of America, as he was revealed as the new Christ figure that everyone worships.
That's true.
That's right.
There's people that worship him.
Yes.
Amy does.
The news certainly do. So it's the good news. It's like the Bible, good news.
Yeah.
All right, anyway.
That same day?
Yeah, July 5th, the autopsy revealed that he was killed by a 45 caliber slug, not a 22.
Oh.
So they brought even more cops in, questioned over 1,200 people, combed even more of the
Let
area.
Mario Van Peebles go.
They did not. They they couldn't find a gun or any other clues by nightfall of July 5th. And Peebles consistently denied that he was the shooter, and he claimed he was playing in the streets when Doyle was killed. And according to police, he was cocky and non-cooperative, and basically taunted them by saying, "You got me, but you haven't got the gun. You've got a tough road ahead of you."
Wow.
That's according to police in 1950,
Yeah.
questioning a black
Right.
Yeah,
guy.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be, just,
He insisted he only used the guns for target practice, which is why the parapet of the roof had been shot up. Since he was under 15 and couldn't be charged with anything more serious, they arraigned him for delinquency and remanded him to the youth house in Lower Manhattan, which is described as a cross between a YMCA branch and a jail. And
I bet it wasn't pleasant.
yeah.
And in a famous alumni moment, it was a place where just 3 years later, a 13-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald would be briefly held.
Oh.
So, yeah, they're
Wow.
really doing
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Bringing up the criminals.
Yeah. Anyway, Peebles had been living with his great aunt Marie Belds in her 515 Edgecombe Avenue apartment since he was 19 months old, and his parents had separated. It was like I don't think he ever knew them. Beld was a North Carolina native,
Oh, North Carolina, y'all.
just a year younger than Doyle, who left school after 6th grade, got married at 20, but was unencumbered by her husband's presence by age 33. They stayed married, but he probably just fucked off and didn't know where he was. And she was working as a domestic for a private family and taking in all sorts of sketchy lodgers to make ends meet to support.
Sketchy lodgers are the best.
Yeah. It was to support people's private school education. This was kind of a common practice in Harlem at the time.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit about Harlem's... there was the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s that made it like a great place for black people to come and have, like, black culture was thriving. There was like
Yeah.
Cab Calloway, Thurgood Marshall, W.E.B. Du Bois, Langston Hughes, Ralph Ellison. The Edgecombe Avenue area was known as Sugar Hill for the sweet life that it offered. And then as World War II came around, there was like Lena Horne, Joe Louis, Duke Ellington were all part of that whole culture there. But that drew so many people with fantasies about living there, and there wasn't enough of that sweet life to go around. And eventually there were 400,000 black people living in a space designed for 75,000 people.
Wow.
And in 1950, Harlem was 98% black, even though New York City as a whole was 94% white.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So, like, there were so many people in such a small area that lodgers became a regular occurrence. People would rent out every room in their house but the kitchen, just to have people hole up so that people had a place to stay.
Right.
So, but then Beld got sick for a while, and people's had so there was a lot of weird, sketchy characters coming through most of his childhood anyway. So that led to some instability. And Beld got sick, and people had to transfer to a public school at age 8, and he didn't adjust well to it. He became something of a problem child in school. And he also suffered from bouts of sleepwalking, including one where he told his great-aunt Beld that he was going to go look for his mother.
Did Peoples even do it?
There's some question about that. Around age 11, he was sent to the Lafargue Clinic, which was Harlem's new and only mental health clinic, founded by a guy named Frederick Wortham, who would become infamous a few years later when he published a book called Seduction of the Innocent about how comic books turn kids into delinquents. And later, when it was revealed that he had falsified some of his work for that book. So he's kind of a sketchy dude. But at the time, though, this clinic was one of the only places offering mental health help to black people, although the quality of that help is up for debate. Yeah. But he did eventually speak on People's behalf at the trial. People was kind of a nerdy kid. He wore tortoiseshell black glasses, and he was kind of undersized, and he was known to read DC Comics as well. He worked part-time jobs delivering packages for grocery stores, but he also started dabbling in crime, like burglary. On May 5th, 1950, just 2 months before Doyle's shooting, he was arrested for car theft, and on the very night of Doyle's shooting, he robbed another house for about $73, which doesn't make a lot of sense for someone to do if they had just killed someone and it's all over the news.
Yeah, I would think if you're a kid and you just shot somebody at a baseball game,
yeah, there's no way
the
you're going to go off
adrenaline
and
and the
rob
and the
somebody
craziness
else.
of it, and the oh my god, I just killed,
Yeah, so there's some thought there. On July 7th at 2:30 p.m.
the same day that Fats Navarro died, 26-year-old American jazz trumpet player.
Oh yeah,
He was probably fat.
yes, he was probably fat. A day after the police had broadened their search area, questioned 1,000 more people, had their youth squad. The youth squad mingled with kids playing in the park trying to pick up leads, like 21 Jump Street, and they still turned up nothing. But then, that was July 6th. But then July 7th, in the afternoon, Peebles suddenly and unexpectedly confessed after days of questioning, according to police.
Really?
The story was that Peebles had found a .45 with a single bullet in its chamber in Central Park 6 months earlier, and that he decided to save it in order to fire it on the 4th of July, where he fired up at a 45-degree angle from the roof of his apartment building with no intention of shooting anyone at the Polo Grounds. He didn't know that the bullet had hit someone until a friend of his heard it on the news half an hour later. And the news scared him enough that he threw the gun away behind a public swimming pool, and he went back with police to that area, but no gun was ever found.
Huh.
There is some doubt as to the legitimacy of this confession that people signed. For one, the Dr. Wortham, the comic book guy, was not convinced that he was guilty. The 1950 New York Police Department was not known for its honesty or for treating black people well. And the and the white news media wasn't particularly interested in verifying the NYPD's story. They just took it at face value.
Yeah, right.
And the police had also arrested his great aunt Marie Beld for gun possession due to Peebles having those .22 caliber guns, and they might have threatened her freedom as leverage to coerce a confession for a high profile case they needed to get closed as soon as possible. Since they had no other suspects, they found a way to make the crime fit the suspect by feeding him the "I found a gun" story.
Yeah,
that's possible. There was also a 16-year-old best friend named Arnold Henderson who was shown a .45 from the police armory and testified that Peebles had one. It's possible they had some leverage on Henderson that they used to squeeze a snitch out of him, or it's possible that Peebles took the hit for someone else rather than be perceived as a snitch, and possibly to protect an older perpetrator who would have gotten a far worse punishment than he would as a minor. And it's also possible that just a 14-year-old kid going up against a team of police investigators for days without proper sleep, he finally just broke and gave them what they wanted.
Yeah.
Either way, Peebles was sentenced to the state training school for boys at Warwick in Orange County, New York for the delinquency, and since they still had no murder weapon. He was released 2 years later. He moved to Troy, New York, got married, had a couple of kids, but eventually began to slide back into crime life, collecting guns and committing burglaries, until a warrant for his arrest was issued for non-support of his family, and he essentially disappeared, likely using different names. He might still be alive in his 80s. He might be dead. No one really knows.
Oh.
And
so he got away.
Well, no, he was sentenced to 2 years in reform school, but he wasn't convicted for that murder.
It was an accident.
He wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, it was basically the accident story, a freak occurrence. And Otto Flake Jr. grew up to be a Marine, then a police chief in Teterboro, New Jersey, and he used this story as a cautionary tale to teach kids not to play with guns. And he died in 1992. And footnote, the owner of the New York Giants, Horace Stoneham, was really shaken up by this story. It's kind of passed from the headlines and everyone sort of let it go, but he did not. And he was likely the one who sent some suits over to Doyle's widow's home quickly after Doyle's death to get her to sign documents clearing the organization of any wrongdoing, which is apparently something that Bernard Jr. was hacked off about for the rest of his life. Yeah, because they didn't get a chance to do anything and or hold anybody responsible. But even though the Giants would win the pennant the next year in the shot heard around the world, which I'm sure you'll cover, and they won the championship a couple years later, Stoneham just cited the Doyle shooting as part of the declining neighborhood in the area of the deteriorating ballpark of the Polo Grounds as some of the reasons that just 8 years later he uprooted the Giants and moved them to San Francisco. The same year the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, making New York from a 3-team town to a 1-team town.
Yeah.
Until the Mets showed up in 1962. And Otto Flake Jr. died a Mets fan.
Okay.
There you go.
Wow. Interesting.
Good job,
I've
Angel.
always wondered the fanhood history of Otto Flake Jr.
I thought you'd be really intrigued to know that he was a Giants fan until he left, and then he was a Mets fan. I know that's really everything you're interested in.
That's all we care about, and we're gonna jump. That was a very in depth. In fact, you were telling, I was like, that would have been an Amy. Like you could have covered that story,
Yeah.
a murder story.
I didn't find it.
But who would have known? Like when I'm reading just the headline of that, who would have known there was that much into it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was
like a guy got shot at a game. You know?
It took me a while to find that much because I found this book. The section that I got most of the information from was from Dan Van de Mortel, which is a section of this is an anthology book called the Polo Grounds: Essays and Memories of New York City's Historic Ballpark.
Okay.
And but all the other information, like there's a Sports Illustrated article covering it that was really surface level. The New York Daily News had articles from the time that were really kind of not super well researched. And I've found some stuff like there's cityjournal.org with the Southeast Missouri. And I found little bits and pieces there, but it wasn't until I found this book that anyone had done such in-depth reporting on Robert Peebles and his whole history as well.
Yeah, that's good.
That's so much stuff. July 8th, 1950 was a Saturday, and G. Menon Williams, the governor of Michigan, was attacked and briefly taken hostage by inmates at the Marquette Branch Prison while making a personal visit to investigate complaints about the conditions.
Oh, my goodness.
And one of his attackers was shot dead. So it's crazy that the Michigan governor, this recent time wasn't the first time there was a plot to kidnap the Michigan governor.
That is crazy.
Yeah. According to the Battle Creek Inquirer, apparently Williams stepped into the kitchen to taste the lima beans they were serving to the 450 inmates when 35-year-old Crazy Jack Hyatt, an inmate, came through a door swinging a mop handle. A guard tried to stop him, but Hyatt broke his arm with the mop handle. Then 50-year-old Ralph Stearns, a lifer, came through the door with a butcher knife, and they both grabbed the governor by the arms and dragged him through the door. They were going to use him to escape, to use him as a hostage and escape.
Right.
Stearns then, according to the newspaper at the time, menaced Williams with the butcher knife, and Hyatt assisted with a smaller knife. So apparently menacing is just like threatening with a knife because he wasn't injured at all. The governor had a knife held to his throat, but his attackers were soon overpowered by his bodyguard, George Kerr, who was stabbed twice and prison employees helped. One of his attackers was shot dead. Williams was unharmed and mostly unshaken, choosing to continue on with his tour of the Upper Peninsula. He used the attack to his political advantage, blaming it on budget cuts made by Republican-controlled Michigan legislature. He was a Democrat. So,
Wow.
yeah.
This was before the Dixiecrats. So this was when...
No, he was liberal. So this was right around that time that it was switching. Like,
oh, it is?
this was right in the middle of the switcheroos. Like, he was liberal and was a union guy, and they were like in the middle of the switching.
Oh, okay.
Kind of, I think.
I thought it was the Civil Rights Act that kind of caused that switch, and that wasn't until like 67.
That's what I was thinking too. But
I mean, this guy was, yeah. I think it was from. I think that was
Jim
all
Crow.
part of it. Like
Jim Crow.
I don't
era.
know. Like I could be wrong, but so maybe they didn't. No, maybe they just. Well, no, he was a Democrat.
Or maybe the lines weren't so sharply drawn then. There was maybe you were allowed to be a little less party liney.
Well, I looked him up a lot, and he did a lot of things for he was trying to help African Americans and stuff, but he was still even the people trying to help African Americans stated it in a racist way. It just, I don't know. I don't know too much about it, so I don't want to get into it. So I really don't know, but I know they said he was more of a liberal. So I don't know if it was.
All right.
I don't know if it just switched over. It didn't switch overnight. It obviously took time, so I'm not really sure. But I am interested in learning all that someday. And July 9th, 1950 was a Sunday. The first propaganda broadcast by an American prisoner of war captured by North Korea occurred as a U.S. Army officer of the 24th Infantry Division made a 900-word broadcast on Seoul radio. Broadcasts from other officers followed, and behavioral researchers made the first studies of what Edward Hunter would first refer to as brainwashing. That happened.
Okay.
And then...
Which is something new you could do, I guess, because, with the advent of television.
Yeah, kind of a newer thing, and yeah. And Friday, July 14th, 1950, Christian evangelist Billy Graham prayed in the White House with U.S. President Harry S. Truman, the first of many meetings that Graham would have with American presidents. Graham would meet with every American president over the next 60 years.
The power of organized
Isn't that
religion.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's nuts. And then Saturday, July 15th, 1950, Mona Lisa by Nat King Cole topped the Billboard bestsellers and stores chart. You know that song?
I like that song. Yeah. Mona Lisa, men have made you. You're unlike the lady with the broken heart.
Nat King Cole was awesome, and Andy made out with his daughter. Didn't you?
No, I didn't.
Natalie Cole.
Natalie Cole.
I helped walk her to her car once.
You pushed her in a wheelchair, didn't you? I thought you pushed her wheelchair out on the stage.
I accompanied her wheelchair to her car on Fifth Avenue. It was being pushed by someone she knew. This was.
Oh, I thought you pushed it.
No.
I told everybody my brother pushed Natalie Cole's wheelchair.
You lied.
I pushed the button for the elevator and helped her get onto it and get into her car.
And it wasn't long before. It was just close to when she passed away.
Yeah,
right?
just a few months before she died. She was able to pull it together to perform on stage.
That was the thing. She was backstage at our theater a couple months before she died.
Yeah.
And she was really in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like, everybody looked at her like, how was she going to perform? And she got up from her wheelchair, got on stage, and was amazing.
Yeah, the adrenaline.
The adrenaline rush. You couldn't tell that there was anything wrong with her. And then she went back to being rough. I tell people all the time that Andy killed her. Because you were the last one to see her with our company.
But she was on oxygen, and I don't know how you're on oxygen and are still able to belt out like she did.
Unbelievable. Yeah. She was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, she, I guess now that she's gone, I can probably talk about this, that she had on her rider, her rider had a demand. I don't know if it's a demand, but
request.
A request. And it's not a request. You have to do these things. You agree. You sign something. You'll do these things. She wanted like 10 boxes of cereal, like jumbo family boxes of cereal. And it wasn't easy to find them all. And there were specific kinds. And so we had to go all over Hell's Half Acre to find these boxes of cereal. And none of them were opened or ever used. So then we just had to give these boxes of cereal away to people.
That's crazy.
But
she just likes being near cereal.
Yeah.
He likes being near giant cereal boxes.
Yeah. Who doesn't really?
Yeah, everyone does. And then we'll jump to Monday, July 17th, 1950, which is Amy has something on the same day that the city of St. Louis, Missouri was ordered by a federal judge to desegregate all of its municipal swimming pools within 2 days, ending the status quo of separate swimming facilities for white people and black people.
Good.
In 1949, the city had closed all of its pools for the summer rather than allow blacks to swim in whites-only pools.
You know, there's a big story there, and I can't remember. I know I read a big article about that, the desegregation of St. Louis swimming pools.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, they decided to close them rather than let black people swim.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Jeez, how
St.
racism.
Louis is St. Louis is bad.
And you're from St. Louis. You're born out of racism.
Pretty much.
And so we're going to jump into something that you're going to tell us about. Do we want to take a quick break?
I need to warm up. I'm getting cold
Yeah,
out
my
here.
feet are frozen. I got to put some slippers on. We're in our garage.
Yeah, I was
And
wondering.
it's unseasonably cold in North Carolina.
Yes.
I was wondering how your garage studio was going to work in the winter.
I'm wearing shorts, so that's part of my own fault.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
But it was 50 degrees outside. I was sweating earlier. I was outside doing yard work.
All right, that's fascinating.
All right, we'll be right back. Listen to this ad for Nerd School.
The Nerd Skool Podcast.
I brought 3 nerds here to help me be a real, true nerd. I love Marvel movies. I love superhero movies.
Nerds like nothing better than to be able to talk about their nerd shit. The people who are actually interested in the nerd shit.
And like I'd walk in the comic book store and I'd see them, they're playing Warhammer.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, Warhammer.
And I'm like sitting
I
there and
will
I'm
say some male nerds back in the day probably would not have let you walk into the arcade and hang out with
looking through the
them.
books and like I'm listening to these guys and like they're really into it. Like their whole life is this Warhammer game.
Yeah.
And I'm
All
like,
the nerds that I ever made fun of or picked on were all just laughing at me getting revenge. And I was just like,
But we didn't need to be around you male nerds to be nerds on our own.
If you're in a good gaming group, they'll welcome new people. They'll
like I'm walking out of the comic store, like if someone going to see me saying like, "Oh, he's one of those guys," you know, those can't get a girl kind of guys.
We are just vibing because we all like this thing, and it's not that.
The Nerd Skool Podcast.
and thanks for listening to that advertisement. And please listen to Nerd School. And we're back at American Timeline by History for Jerks. And Andy, during the break, looked up the Dixiecrats thing to shed some light on it.
Just the Dixiecrats was like Southern Democrats who were super racist and who got mad that Harry Truman tried to integrate the military in 1948. He ordered the integration of the military.
So it was.
So this was the time.
It was a military around 48, 49, 50. That's right. Harry
Yeah.
Truman. I knew.
And the Dixiecrats only lasted they were born and dissolved in the year 1948, but that was still a fresh thing. And like the social change of the Republican Party had started as early as 1912 for some reason, but it's kind of cemented in the civil rights area. So
Got it.
Yeah.
That's when it was from
Yeah.
the 49, 850 to the.
Okay.
I don't know. So it was, yeah.
So there you go.
But now back to July 17th, 1950, when we just talked about the St. Louis, Missouri, and the swimming pools, and Amy's got something that happened that same day.
I'm going to talk about the Rosenbergs.
Ooh.
Andy, have you ever heard of the Rosenbergs?
Rosenbergs, H-Bomb, Sugar Ray, Penwood John, Brando, the King and I.
Oh,
and
it's part of the
Oh,
Billy Joel song.
Rosenbergs has made it into the Billy Joel song,
Yep.
Yeah.
which we've talked about a few things that have. So I'm glad you're doing this, and I'm sorry if I forced you to, but during all my research, I keep bumping into this, and I chose not to cover a lot of it because it's like if you cover one bit of it,
You want to do
I
the
have to
whole
do the
thing.
whole background, and it's just so extensive and so much, and I really, it's hard for me to speak intelligently about this whole communism thing.
Right.
But I keep coming across it, and I choose not to put it all in there because, like I said, if you do one thing and then communism and accusing people of communism is so rampant here. The Mccarthyism we talked a little bit about,
Right.
but these guys were prominent, and I'm glad you're telling me about it to help me understand.
Okay. So the Rosenbergs were accused and executed. It was a married couple that were accused of spying.
You said four of them?
No, they were accused for spying.
Oh, you said four first. You said
Yeah.
Rosenberg's
Sorry.
four were
Sorry.
they.
They were accused for spying for the Soviets,
Okay.
and they were executed, and it was a married couple.
Right.
So they were accused of espionage, and it was like, I think the only like Americans
Yeah.
that were ever executed because of espionage.
Right. And so some of the things I've found and haven't covered, just because I thought I'd just throw it in here, is that like during this month, there were trials for communism and people being accused, kind of, not only in the United States, like India had that
Really?
going on. I mean, other countries and stuff, Japan, like it was happening everywhere. Like this whole
That's the
scare.
That's the Cold War. It's the Red Scare. Everyone was
The Red
terrified
Scare, yeah.
of, Stalin and the Russians, and then the spread of communism.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Julius Rosenberg was born May 12th, 1918.
Oh, the same day that Mary Kay Ash was born, the American business executive, founder of Mary Kay Cosmetics, that same day? They could be twins.
Yes, in New York City to a family of Jewish immigrants from the Russian Empire.
Oh, well, Mary Kay was born in Hot Wells, Texas.
Trying to move this down a little bit. The family moved to the Lower East Side by the time Julius was 11.
Okay.
His parents worked in the shops at the Lower East Side, and Julius attended Seward Park High School. He became a leader in the Young Communist League while at the City College of New York during the Great Depression.
Okay.
In 1939, he graduated with a degree in electrical engineering. Ethel Greenglass was born on September 28th, 1915.
Oh, she was born when the Anglo-French Financial Commission and an American syndicate led by J.P. Morgan and Company reached a credit agreement for $500 million over 5 years, at the time the largest single loan in financial history.
Okay.
Wow.
She was born to a Jewish family in Manhattan, New York City. She had a brother, David Greenglass. Keep that in under your hat, because that will come back.
Under my hat.
Yep. She originally was an aspiring actress and singer, but eventually took a secretarial job at a shipping company.
All right.
She became involved in labor disputes and joined the Young Communist League, where she met Julius in 1936.
Okay.
They married in 1939. Together, they had two sons, Michael and Robert, born 1943 and 1947.
Now, these times, these Young Communist Leagues, these weren't illegal at these times in the 30s, right?
Right.
No, they're not illegal now.
Yeah, they weren't like
It's freedom of speech.
terrorism or whatever else. It was okay. It wasn't. It was probably frowned upon.
Right.
Yeah.
So Julian Rosenberg joined the Army Signal Corps Engineering in 1940,
Okay.
where he worked as an engineer inspector until 1945. He was fired when the U.S. Army discovered his previous membership in the Communist Party.
All right.
So it wasn't illegal, but you could get fired for it.
Yeah, you could lose your job.
Important research on electronics, communications, radar, and guided missile controls was undertaken at Fort Monmouth during World War II. According to a 2001 book by his former handler, Alexander Fekslisov, something like that, Rosenberg was originally recruited to spy for the Interior Ministry of the Soviet Union on Labor Day 1942 by former spymaster Semyon Semyonov.
Oh, Semyon Semyonov, y'all.
By this time, following the invasion by Nazi Germany in June 1941, the Soviet Union had become an ally of the Western powers, which included the United States and after Pearl Harbor. So Rosenberg had been introduced to Semyonov by Bernard Schuster, a high-ranking member of the Communist Party in the United States.
Okay.
Rosenberg provided thousands of classified reports, including a complete proximity fuse, which is a part of a missile.
Oh.
He also recruited sympathetic individuals into the NKVD service. Some of the intelligence stolen included a complete set of design and production drawings for Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, the first U.S. operational jet fighter. Julius also recruited Ethel's brother, David Greenglass, who was working in the top-secret Manhattan Project.
So this sounds like they are. Are they trying to steal military stuff from the U.S.? Are they? Like,
That's what's alleged.
Oh, this is all being alleged. Okay.
In February 1944, Rosenberg succeeded in recruiting a second source of Manhattan Project information, engineer Russell McNutt, who worked on designs for the plants at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. For this success, Rosenberg received a $100 bonus. McNutt's employment provided access to secrets about processes for manufacturing weapons-grade uranium.
Russell McNutt?
Wouldn't it be processes?
I don't know. The USSR and the U.S. were allies during World War II, right?
Right.
But the Americans didn't share information about or seek assistance from the Soviet Union regarding the Manhattan Project. The West was shocked by the speed with which the Soviets were able to stage their first nuclear test, which was called Joe 1, on August 29th, 1949.
Oh, that's the same. They staged that the same day that Stan Hansen was born in Knox City, Texas.
Professional wrestler.
Wrestler Stan Hansen. You love Stan Hansen.
In January 1950, the U.S. discovered Klaus Fuchs, a German refugee theoretical physicist working for the British mission in the Manhattan Project, had given key documents to the Soviets throughout the war. Fuchs identified his courier as American Harry Gold, who was arrested on May 23rd, 1950.
Now, I'm glad you're talking about Fuchs because I've had him in here a couple times. And I always thought it was Fuchs. And I think it actually is Fuchs.
So Fuchs is arrested. He implicates Harry Gold. Then Gold confesses and identifies David Greenglass as an additional source.
Gotcha.
This is how they're getting to Rosenberg.
They're getting him little by other people, but also Stan Hansen was a tag team partner of beautiful Bobby Eaton in the Midnight Express. I didn't put that in there.
On June 15th, 1950, David Greenglass was arrested by the FBI for espionage and soon confessed to having passed secret information onto the USSR through Gold.
Oh, wait. On the same day that an Air France airliner crashed for the second time in 2 days in the Persian Gulf near Bahrain. The Skymaster, which had started in Saigon and stopped at Karachi, signaled that it would make an emergency landing with only 13 people surviving out of 53 on board. The June 13th crash had occurred at 12:15 a.m. while approaching Bahrain, while the new accident happened at 12:45 a.m. under the same circumstances, according to the Aviation Safety Network.
All right. Yes. On that day. So he also claimed that Julius had convinced his wife Ruth to recruit him in 1944. This is David Greenglass.
Yeah, David Greenglass is saying this.
He said that Julius had passed secrets and thus linked him to a Soviet agent. Then, on July 17th, Julius Rosenberg was arrested on suspicion of espionage.
That's where we currently are.
Based on David Greenglass's confession. That's the only basis they have.
Okay.
On August 11th, 1950, Ethel Rosenberg was arrested after testifying before a grand jury.
She was arrested the same day that Steve Wozniak was born? I don't think that's not related to this.
Okay. So their case against Ethel Rosenberg was resolved 10 days before the start of the trial when David and Ruth Greenglass were interviewed a second time.
Okay.
They were persuaded to change their original stories. So David originally had said that he'd passed the atomic data he'd collected to Julius on a New York street corner. Then after they interviewed him a second time, he said that he had given this information to Julius in the living room of the Rosenbergs' apartment. And then Ethel, at Julius' request, had taken his notes and typed them up. In her re-interview, Ruth Greenglass expanded on her husband's version. This was a quote from her. She said, Julius then took the info into the bathroom and read it, where he came out, and he called Ethel and told her she had to type the information immediately. Ethel then sat down at a typewriter, which she placed on a bridge table in the living room, and proceeded to type the information that David had given to Julius. So as a result of that new testimony, all of the charges against Ruth Greenglass were dropped.
All right.
So the first...
you give somebody else
They had implicated David and his wife Ruth, but then they interview him a second time. Their story's different, so they let Ruth go now.
Right.
On August 11th, Ethel Rosenberg testified before a grand jury. For all questions, she pled the fifth.
Okay.
FBI agents took her into custody as she left the courthouse. Her attorney asked the U.S. commissioner to parole her in his custody over the weekend so that she could make arrangements for her two young children. The request was denied. Julius and Ethel were put under pressure to incriminate others involved in the spy ring. Neither offered any further information. On October 17th, the grand jury returned an indictment alleging over 11 overt acts. Both Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were indicted, as were David Greenglass and Anatoly Yakovlev, however you say that.
Okay.
So
probably not like that.
The Rosenbergs were charged with conspiracy to commit espionage and brought to trial on March 6, 1951.
Oh, the same day that the Billy Rose show was on TV?
Yes.
He was the host. And Billy Rose was a major force in entertainment with shows such as Billy Rose's Crazy Quilt, Jumbo, Billy Rose's Aquacade, and Carmen Jones. As a lyricist, he is credited with many songs, Notably, Don't Bring Lulu in 1925, Tonight You Belong to Me in 1926, known as that's the song that they sing in The Jerk together. Tonight you belong to me. Just
Can I go on?
anyway, yeah. So that was on.
All right. So
TV.
Greenglass was the chief witness for the prosecution.
Okay.
On March 29th, they were found guilty, and on April 5th, the couple were sentenced to death.
Wow.
Sobel and Gold received 30-year prison terms, and Greenglass, who was tried separately, was sentenced to 15 years. That's all he got.
Okay.
For 2 years, the Rosenberg case was appealed to the courts and before world opinion. The constitutionality and applicability of the Espionage Act of 1917, under which the Rosenbergs were tried, as well as the impartiality of the trial judge, Irving R. Kaufman, who in pronouncing sentence had accused them of a crime worse than murder, were key issues during the appeals process. 7 different appeals reached the Supreme Court of the United States and were denied, and pleas for executive clemency were dismissed by President Harry Truman in 1952 and President Dwight Eisenhower in 1953. A worldwide campaign for mercy failed, and the Rosenbergs were executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison in New York. Ethel became the first woman executed by the U.S. government since Mary Surratt was hanged in 1865 for her alleged role in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
Do they have any evidence? Like,
just the testimony of
that's
the
it.
guy, yeah.
All based on that.
Yep.
That's crazy.
On June 19th, 1953, Julius...
Oh, the same night that the Schlitz Playhouse of Stars was on CBS?
Yes.
You know, when you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer.
Yes. Julius died... Julius and Ethel were both sent to the electric chair on that date.
Yikes.
In the
wow,
years,
people were laughing and watching the Schlitz Playhouse of Stars while they were dying of...
In the years
just being
after the
forced to die.
Rosenbergs' executions, there was significant debate about their guilt.
Yeah.
The two were frequently regarded as victims of cynical and vindictive officials of the FBI. Highly sympathetic portraits were offered in major novels. The controversy over their guilt was seemingly resolved in the early 1990s after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the release of Soviet intelligence information that confirmed Julius Rosenberg's involvement in espionage.
Oh, so they've confirmed that he really
Well,
was doing that. So they've said.
So they've said. In 2015, an independent lawsuit secured the release of grand jury testimony in 1950 by Greenglass, which indicated that he might have lied at trial by exaggerating his sister's role in the espionage ring in order to obscure the more extensive involvement in his wife, Ruth, who was not prosecuted.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
well, and that's the thing. It seems like things were crazy then. Like everyone was insane and accusing everybody, and you're quick to just point fingers at somebody else, and if you name somebody, we'll let you go.
Right.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah, and the whole changing stories thing. It seems like
it seems a little iffy.
Yes. So in 1995, there was this thing called the Venona Project, and it was a U.S. counterintelligence program to decrypt messages transmitted by the intelligence agencies of the Soviet Union.
Okay.
And this was initiated when the Soviet Union was an ally of the U.S. The program continued during the Cold War when it was considered an enemy. In 1995, the U.S. government made public many documents decoded by the Venona Project showing Julius Rosenberg's role as part of the productive ring of spies. The messages decoded by the Venona Project were not made public during Rosenberg's trial, which relied instead on testimony from their collaborators. Nevertheless, these decryptions formed the background of the U.S. government's investigation and prosecution of American communists during the Cold War period. Hold on.
Man.
In 2001, David Greenglass recanted his testimony about his sister having typed the notes. He said, I frankly think my wife did the typing, but I don't remember.
Whoa.
He said he gave false testimony to protect himself and his wife, Ruth, and that he was encouraged by the prosecution to do so.
Yikes.
My wife is more important to me than my sister or my mother or my father, okay? And and she was the mother of my children. You better do that for me.
Sorry, Andy. Andy did it.
Yep.
I got to protect my wife.
Oh, no.
He refused to express remorse for his decision to betray his sister, saying only that he did not realize that the prosecution would push for the death penalty. He stated, I would not sacrifice my wife and my children for my sister.
Yeah, I won't either. Andy and Susie are communists. If anybody's listening, please.
Yes.
And then in September of 2008, the National Archives released most of the grand jury testimony related to the prosecution of the Rosenbergs as a result of a suit. These revealed irreconcilable differences between Ruth Greenglass's grand jury testimony of August 1950 and the testimony she gave at trial.
Those poor people were put to death.
In one example, at the grand jury, she was asked, "Didn't you write the information down on a piece of paper?" And she replied, "Yes, I wrote it down on a piece of paper, and Julius Rosenberg took it with him." But at the trial, she testified that Ethel Rosenberg typed up the notes about the atomic bomb. The extent of distortion by the prosecution was shown in their effort to gain a conviction of Ethel Rosenberg. Numerous articles were published in 2008 related to the Rosenberg case. Deputy Attorney General of the United States William P. Rogers, who had been part of the prosecution of the Rosenbergs, discussed their strategy at the time in relation to the seeking the death sentence for Ethel. He said they had urged the death sentence for Ethel in an effort to extract a full confession from Julius.
Sheesh.
He reportedly said she called our bluff, and as she made no effort to push her husband to any action. So they were just putting her to death
Yeah.
so that Julius would confess.
Yeah.
And she, that she would pressure him to confess.
Yeah.
And she didn't do it.
Yikes.
Let's see. In 2008, Morton Sobel was interviewed after revelations from the grand jury testimony. He admitted that he had given documents to the Soviet contact, but said these had to do with defensive radar and weaponry. He confirmed that Julius Rosenberg was in a conspiracy that delivered to the Soviets classified military and industrial information on the atomic bomb, and he never told me about anything else that he was engaged in. He said that he thought the hand-drawn diagrams and other atomic bomb details that were acquired by David Greenglass and passed to Julius were of little value to the Soviet Union and were used only to corroborate what they had already learned from other atomic spies. He also said that he believed Ethel Rosenberg was aware of her husband's deeds but took no part in them. In a subsequent letter to the New York Times, Sobel denied that he knew anything about Julius Rosenberg's alleged atomic espionage activities, and that the only thing he knew for sure was that he himself did in association with Julius, was what he did in association with Julius Rosenberg. Oh. In 2009, extensive notes collected from the KGB archives were made public in a book published by United... Who cares who it's published by? The notebooks
cares.
included KGB comments concerning Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. The notebooks made clear that the KGB considered Julius Rosenberg an effective agent and that his wife Ethel was an enthusiastic supporter of his work. So it's very up in the air.
Yeah.
I don't think she had anything to do with it. But
she was willing to go to death rather than try to pressure him to admit to it.
Right.
So, and she pleaded the fifth for herself the entire time.
Yeah.
Didn't say anything.
But they didn't have any evidence.
There's
no evidence.
Yeah, it's all hearsay.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Right. So.
But it was it's such a scare at the time. Like, it's such a big thing at the time.
Right.
So, not to say that's okay, but...
They were starting wars over this.
Yeah.
Well, and it was weird how fast the Soviet Union got the bomb.
Yeah.
Like, they were like, wait a minute. How'd they
get it so fast?
How did they get it so fast? So obviously, somebody was giving them the secrets.
That's nuts.
Well, I mean, America was also working with former Nazi scientists, weren't they? Maybe the Nazis helped them out or something.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, ugh.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for clearing that up, kind of.
As clear as
Tuesday, July. Yeah, I'll jump back in. Tuesday, July 18th. UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, published The Race Question, authored by 8 scientists led by Professor Ashley Montague. The statement began with the words, "Scientists have reached general agreement in recognizing that mankind is one, that all men belong to the same species, Homo sapiens."
Good.
Because they didn't know that before that.
Right. They assumed,
They thought everybody was a different species.
They
all
thought
the
that
different races
white people were superior.
Yeah. That same day, Major General William F. Dean of the U.S. Army was separated from his unit after North Korean troops overran the city of Daejeon. Dean would spend the next 36 days eluding North Korean patrols and trying to make his way back to friendly territory until he was betrayed to the enemy on August 25th by a South Korean civilian. As a Major General, Dean would be the North Koreans' most important prisoner of war and finally be released on September 4th, 1953. So 3 years of captivity.
I thought you were going to do the wars.
I know, just that thing. I don't know. I'm not. I don't know why I just said that. That same day, Richard Branson was born. And then Wednesday, July 19th, 1950, Ben Carlin and his wife, Eleanor Carlin, set out from Halifax, Nova Scotia.
New Scotland.
New Scotland, which stupid. Why didn't I know that?
Yep.
Like, it was settled by Scottish people. Nova Scotia's New Scotland. We learned that from the Scottish guys last week.
Oh, wow.
Why didn't I know that? Nova Scotia. Of course it is.
All right, keep going.
Dang it. Anyway, it's genius. Anyway, they set out from Halifax in the half safe, which was an amphibious Jeep, in an effort to become the first persons to drive around the world. Mrs. Carlin would abandon the journey after several years because of seasickness, and Mr. Carlin, after long stops along the way, would complete his journey on May 13, 1958, nearly 8 years after starting. He had driven 39,000 miles on land and traversed 9,600 miles on the ocean.
Oh, my
So
God.
it's an amphibious Jeep that turns into a boat.
A boat from
Yeah.
a car?
Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't know anything like that existed.
Apparently it did,
Does it
1950.
still count as driving if you're no longer in a car, you're in a boat?
I guess.
So he did that in that little Jeep thing?
Yeah,
He went around the
39,000
whole
miles on
world?
land and 9,600
How
miles
did
on
he
the
get
ocean.
fuel?
But he stopped a lot of times. Like
Well, I know, but there.
he didn't complete it. It took him 8 years. So he stopped and hung out with people. Probably had a lot of sex.
All
got
right.
drunk a lot.
All right.
That same day, Walt Disney Studios first completed Walt Disney Studios released its first completely live action film. You know what that's called?
Live action.
The
Song of the South.
Nope.
What's that Kurt Russell movie where he's the computer bully or
Bed
something?
Knobs and Broomsticks?
Nope.
No, I'm sure it's not the Kurt Russell movie.
No, because it's 1950.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention
Here's a
it,
hint.
and I can't remember its name.
The pubes from your belly button lead down to.
Stop.
It's a treasure trail.
Oh, my God.
Treasure Island. I don't know why that's my clue. Anyway, I don't know if you guys knew this, but the modern day pirate accent we know now didn't exist until this film. It came from Robert Newton's portrayal of Long John Silver in the 1950 Disney adaptation of Treasure Island. Before that, there was no universal pirate accent.
Wow, that's pretty funny.
Wow.
The treasure-seeking adventures of young Jim Hawkins and a pirate Captain Long John Silver. Directed by Byron Haskin. Written by Lawrence Edward Watkin, who wrote the screenplay.
All
Robert
right.
Louis Stevenson wrote the story. Starring Bobby Driscoll, Robert Newton, and Basil Sidney. Disney started the project when post-war restrictions stopped him from transferring profits from his cartoons out of the United Kingdom. Rather than set up a new animated studio, he used the profits and existing facilities to produce a conventional film. The movie was filmed in England, not in the West Indies, using Disney's frozen UK profits. The name Long John refers to cannibalism. This is reinforced when Ben Gunn mentions that Long John Silver will treat him like pork if he finds him. Human flesh supposedly tastes like pork, and cannibals refer to humans as long pig, which is why anyone who has practiced cannibalism had the nickname Long. So Long John Silver had at one time eaten human flesh.
That's pretty cool little trivia.
Hey, learn something new every day.
What does that mean about the Long John Silver restaurants then?
It is
Yeah,
human
really.
flesh. It is officially human flesh. Long John Silver's will not be advertising on American timelines
No,
by
not
History for
anytime
Jerks.
soon.
In fact, they will probably sue us. No,
All right.
okay.
We got to wind this up.
I should say officially Long John Silver's is not human flesh, as far as I know.
Right.
And I'm just curious how they decided on what makes a pirate accent for that movie. Like all the
Arr. Some guy probably playing a character.
Yeah, I guess so. He just went
Yeah.
tape shit about it.
And then Thursday, July 20th, 1950, the U.S. Senate voted 45 to 37 to accept a report by the... Hold on. No, I'm just going to skip this. This is more McCarthyism stuff. I'll just skip
Yeah,
it.
suffice to say, Joe McCarthy was an asswipe and made everyone more scared of things
Right.
than they needed to be.
Right.
All right, July 23rd, 1950, since Andy loves country now, the Gene Autry Show premiered on CBS television and would run for 6 seasons.
Okay.
July 24th, 1950 was a Monday. Cape Canaveral in Florida was used for the first time to launch a rocket. When the U.S. Army sent the 2-stage Bumper 8, which combined a German V-2 rocket and an American Whack Corporal rocket to an altitude of 51,000 feet in 83 seconds, then exploded by remote control, was descended to 20,000 feet 57 seconds later.
All right.
Now I have to include this next one because it's awesome. I've never heard of this happening, and it's not an American, so this is a Japanese timeline moment.
Okay.
But Sadamichi Hirasawa was sentenced to death by a Japanese court after being convicted of the murder of 12 people by using poison to rob a bank.
What?
Oh, like a gas bomb?
Now listen to this.
Okay.
On January 26, 1948, Hirasawa had walked into a bank in Tokyo, claimed to be a health officer, and ordered 16 people to drink medicine to combat an epidemic. Then he robbed the bank of 164,400 yen, which is $456 at the time. Hirasawa would remain on death row for the rest of his life as appeals were filed, dying in Hachioji prison at the age of 95 on May 10th, 1987.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? He
Yeah.
robbed a bank with poison.
Yeah, that is weird.
And then,
Weird.
Yeah.
I mean, he just killed everybody in the bank. Or was it just, did everybody die?
Yeah. He just killed him. He made them all drink this poison, saying it was a pandemic going on. It's going to stop the pandemic. So, not to give people ideas now, but you could just walk into a bank and say, hey, here's the
coronavirus cure.
the cure.
Yeah, I think security measures
drink
might be a little
bleach.
different than they were in
Trump
1950.
already did that.
Yeah.
It was like, drink bleach, idiots.
That guy's a piece of shit.
July 28, 1950, Japan's Red Scare saw the firing of 180 newspaper employees suspected of being Japanese Communist Party members or sympathizers. Just kind of reiterating that it's everywhere. And that's it. We'll just end it there.
All right.
Thank you for listening to American Timelines for History for Jerks. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you,
for being
Ando.
a last-minute pinch hitter for Matt Truman Ego Trip.
Yes, you did a fine job, sir.
Thank you much.
Too bad you can't sing as good as Matt Truman.
No, I cannot.
But yeah,
Nobody can.
I think Matt was excited about
of hearing about the 60s. Wait.
Yeah, that sounds
good.
Not like Matt Truman.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, thanks for covering for him, and hopefully he gets over COVID very fast.
Yes.
And Steph, his wife, is awesome, and I know she'll kick its ass too. We love the Trumans. They're really great. They're super talented.
Absolutely.
Buy their music.
Yeah, buy Matt Truman Ego Trip's album. Seriously, there's not a single album of his that's not great. I mean,
Yeah.
shit. I don't know. Just listen to their albums. The one that the American Timelines theme is on.
Right?
Bandcamp. Just look up Matt Truman Ego Trip and you'll find him. We have a couple of their t-shirts. I'm serious. That whole album, like most of their albums are all great. Like better than anything you're going to listen to. And it's an independent band. Like they're as good as anybody. I can't believe how great they are and why. I don't know why he's not famous. I should be paying money to go to his concerts.
That's right. All right.
Which I would if I was in Ohio.
It's time to get out of here, Chuck Berry.
Yeah, time to get out of here. Thanks, Andy. We'll listen to Nerd Skool.
Nerd Skool.
Nerd Skool rocks.
Yes.
Get out of here, Chuck Berry. And let Dale through.
That's right.
Let Dale through. Let Dale
That's
through.
gonna be my new tag. You can say get out of here, Chuck Berry. I'll say let Dale through.
Have you been down on the streets today? Say, yeah, now, baby, it's about to get crazy. Everybody's got something to say.
American Timelines is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network, powered by Ortho Carolina. Find out more at queencitypodcastnetwork.com.
Thank you. Love you.